This video, we're going to talk about converting a long-term rental into a short-term rental. So when you decide or you consider making this transition, there are some key factors that you need to consider in order to be successful at it. So before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Keisha Rondino. I am a real estate and business CPA, and my goal is to educate you on tax strategies and business strategies in order to save on taxes, keep more of the money you make, and build wealth in your investments in your business. So let's get into it. So if you are a property owner that currently operates a long-term rental and you are interested or considering converting it into a short-term rental, there are some things to keep in mind if you want to be successful. And one of the first things is understanding what the laws are in the location that you will operate your short-term rental, meaning that you want to know what the zoning laws are, what the rules and regulations are that surrounds operating a short-term rental in your city or in your county or in your state, because there are some new developments that may allow you to operate as a short-term rental and may not allow you to. And you also want to check your homeowners association as well too, because there have been many times that homeowners associations do not allow you to operate as a short-term rental. They have banned it, or they have their own set of rules and regulations if you do decide to operate a property as a short-term rental. So the second thing is market analysis. And that means doing some research on where you're going to operate your short-term rental. So understanding if that is a good place to have a short-term rental, how other short-term rentals are operating in that area from a financial standpoint, if there's any tourist attractions that may attract people that to want to stay in your short-term rental. That is going to help when determining what your occupancy rate or even vacancy rate may be, which can in turn affect what your income is and your profits on operating the short-term rental. So market analysis is going to be important so you can know if it's a good idea to even do the conversion from having guests come and stay at your rental. The third thing is you have to prepare your property to operate as a short-term rental. So when you operate as a long-term rental, usually you will have a tenant in place, and as long as everything is functioning appropriately for someone to move in and they're able to live comfortably, you are good to go. But when you operate a short-term rental, there's going to be more upgraded type of experience that you may want to offer your guests in order to be attractive to your guests, meaning that you may want to upgrade the type of amenities that you have in the property, whether it is the appliances, whether it's the linens, whether it is the overall experience that you have for your guests there once they decide to stay there. So having things in place to make it attractive to those that may want to use it when they're away from home. So when people rent an Airbnb, their goal is to get an away from home experience. So usually you want it to be nicer than just a regular property that someone's renting, because you do want them to get the experience to where they can tell others about it, and if possible, if they come back to the area, that they will utilize your short-term rental as well too. So you want to make it convenient for guests, you want to make it comfortable for your guests, which means that you're going to consistently need to have it upgraded and attractive so guests will want to stay there. The fourth consideration is marketing your short-term rental. So how do you plan to market it? When you operate as a long-term rental, your goal is to get a great tenant in there. And so what you do to get a tenant in there at that time is going to be different from when you are marketing to have short-term guests to come in. And so are you going to use Airbnb? Are you going to use Vrbo? Are you going to use booking.com? Are you going to use the power of social media in order to attract clients there? But you have to have a marketing plan and promotions plan in place in order to get people to want to come, especially if you have previously operated as a long-term rental. No one is going to know that you're converting this to a short-term rental. And so you will need ways in order to tell the world that, hey, this is a short-term rental and this is why you need to come to my short-term rental. And once you have guests that starts to utilize your short-term rental, you want them to leave reviews so it can be attractive incentive for others to want to utilize your short-term rental as well. Many times, one of the first things we do when we get ready to book a short-term rental is let's see what the reviews say. So having your past guests leave reviews about the property is another way of marketing the property to have other guests to come in. The fifth consideration is operational considerations. How do you plan to operate? When you have a short-term rental, it functions very differently than a long-term rental, meaning that the time that you put into operating it as a short-term rental is very different than when you operate as a long-term rental. So when you have a long-term tenant, you basically get them in place and you are very hands-off. Unless there are some repairs or some maintenance that needs to be done, or there's an issue with the property, you usually don't hear from your tenants very often. Well, it is very different when you're operating a short-term rental. You have to clean consistently when guests leave. You have to be on call if there are any maintenance issues that take place. You need to check guests in and make sure the property is prepared for when guests come in. You need to have bookings. There's a lot more time that goes into operating a short-term rental than with a long-term rental. So the question is, are you going to do that yourself, or are you going to pay a management company to do it? If you determine that you're going to do it yourself, are you going to use a management software? Are you going to use something that allows you to make this easier? And if you do, what is that software going to be? If you determine that you're going to use a management company, what is going to be the right management company for utilizing that or managing your short-term rental? Because the same property management company that manages long-term rentals, they may not be as qualified to manage short-term rentals for the exact reason that we're speaking about now, because the time commitment and what it entails to operate both are very different. So when you hire a management company to manage your short-term rental, interview them, make sure they know what they're doing, check to see if it's something that they've done before, because it is different when they are managing your long-term rental versus your short-term rental. And when you do hire a management company, keep in mind that that is going to be an additional expense that you will have to incur in order to operate the short-term rental. And that leads us into the sixth consideration, which is the financial consideration. So that is making sure that what you expect to make from the short-term rental is realistic against what you're going to be spending. And so knowing what your income may be. So what are you going to charge guests to stay there? Are you going to have a certain number of days that guests can stay there? So estimating what your potential income may be and knowing what your rates are going to be will be important, as well as what your expenses are going to be. So if you have that management fee, making sure that it is going to still help you produce a profit. If you're going to have streaming services, if you're going to have cable, if you're going to have utilities, you're going to have some maintenance, you're going to have to consistently buy supplies for the property because you're going to have guests that's going to be coming in. So things that you did not supply when it was operating as a long-term rental, you will now be operating as a short-term rental. You're going to be spending money on furniture, on appliances. So knowing what your expected expenses are going to be, as well as what your expected income is going to be, will help you determine if it's a good investment for you to do the conversion. And that will ensure that you're benefiting from converting to a short-term rental because you are still going to be making a profit from it. If you found this video helpful, I ask that you like and subscribe to my channel, and also share it with other real estate investors so they can have information on converting their long-term rental to a short-term rental. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Until then, bye.